Hello, survivors. Before we dive into today's story, take a second to hit that like button and subscribe. Let's grow our community together. My name is Captain Pete Cruz, B-2 Spirit Pilot, 509th Bomb Wing, Whiteman Air Force Base. 3 days ago, I was just another ghost in the sky. Today, I'm writing this on a busted laptop in some godforsaken farmhouse in rural Arkansas, listening to Kilmer clean his sidearm for the 15th time because the clicking sound drowns out the moaning outside. This is what happened. This is how the world ended from 50,000 feet. The Spirit cut through the darkness like God's own razor. No running lights, no radio chatter, nothing but the whisper of air over our diamond-shaped wings. Below us, the mountains stretched endlessly, black ridges cutting against a starless sky. I'd been flying for 14 hours straight, my ass numb against the ejection seat, caffeine tablets burning a hole in my stomach. Target acquisition in 90 seconds, Kilmer whispered into his headset. My weapons systems officer had been with me for 3 years and I'd never heard his voice that tight. Even during the Syria runs, even when we'd painted Iranian radar sites with precision munitions, Kilmer kept his cool. Tonight was different. The coordinates burned green on my heads-up display. 46.2276 degree NN, 25,8064 degree RSE. Some nameless valley in the Romanian Carpathians, where no valley should have secrets. But satellites don't lie, and neither do thermal signatures. The complex was there, buried under 1,000 feet of limestone and concrete, pumping out enough heat to light up our sensors like a Christmas tree. Massive ordnance penetrator armed and ready, Kilmer confirmed. 30,000 pounds of bunker-busting death hung in our belly, a single shot to end whatever nightmare had been growing in that mountain. I banked left, feeling the Spirit respond like liquid metal. The targeting computer painted crosshairs over the mountain peak, calculating wind speed, air density, gravitational drop. Mathematics of destruction. I'd done this dance 100 times before, but never with stakes this high. Command, this is Ghost Rider. We have visual on target requesting final confirmation for weapons release. Static crackled in my headset for 5 seconds that felt like eternity. Then General Powell's voice cut through the interference, cold as winter steel. Ghost Rider, you are cleared hot. God help us all. The bomb bay doors split open with a mechanical whine. Wind screamed through the gap, fighting against our pressurized cabin. The GBU-57 dropped clean, its guidance fins unfolding like the wings of some mechanical angel of death. From our altitude, I couldn't see the impact, but the infrared cameras captured everything in perfect detail. The warhead punched through rock and concrete like they were made of tissue paper, boring deep into the mountain's heart before detonating. The explosion bloomed white-hot on our screens, a miniature sun burning away whatever secrets the complex had held. Direct hit, Kilmer reported, his voice steady again. Target destroyed, we're RTB. Return to base. 2 simple words that should have meant we'd won, that we'd stopped whatever bioengineered horror had been cooking in that underground lab before it could spread beyond the mountain walls. We were 18 hours from home. 18 hours to learn we were already too late. The first sign something was wrong came through the radio chatter. Not our frequency. We maintained strict radio silence during international operations, but the emergency bands were lighting up like a Christmas tree. Fragmentary transmissions bleeding through the static. Containment breach in Hamburg Port Authority. CDC teams requesting immediate military assistance in Boston. 37 dead at JFK Terminal 4. Suspect some kind of viral. Kilmer and I exchanged glances through our helmet visors. Emergency broadcasts weren't unusual, but the volume was unprecedented. Every major city seemed to be reporting simultaneous medical emergencies. Could be related to our target, Kilmer suggested, his voice cutting through the engine noise. Maybe they had off-site facilities we didn't know about. I wanted to believe that. I wanted to believe we'd struck some tentacle of a larger beast. And now the other limbs were thrashing in their death throes. But the geographic spread made no sense. Hamburg to Boston to Los Angeles. If our target in Romania had been the source, the infection vectors would have followed predictable patterns. Shipping routes, air traffic corridors, refugee movements. This was everywhere at once. Ghost Rider, this is Whiteman Tower. Radio check, over. I keyed my microphone. Whiteman Tower, Ghost Rider. We're 3 hours out, all systems green. Roger, Ghost Rider. Be advised you're being diverted to emergency approach vector. Medical teams will be standing by upon arrival. My blood went cold. Medical teams meant biological contamination protocols. It meant they thought we'd been exposed to whatever we'd just bombed into radioactive dust. Whiteman Tower, confirm medical teams. We had no direct contact with target materials. Negative, Ghost Rider. This is precautionary due to developing situation CONUS. You'll be briefed upon arrival. Maintain current heading and altitude. CONUS, continental United States. Whatever was happening, it wasn't contained to Romania anymore. The landing felt like coming home to a war zone. Emergency vehicles lined the runway, their red and blue lights painting the tarmac in stuttering colors. Personnel in full hazmat suits guided us to an isolated hangar, their bulky forms moving with the practiced efficiency of people who'd done this drill before. But this wasn't a drill. As our engines spun down, I could see through the cockpit glass that something was fundamentally wrong with Whiteman. Too many vehicles, too much activity for a normal Tuesday evening. Soldiers in full battle gear manning checkpoints that hadn't existed when we'd left 24 hours ago. Black Hawk helicopters circling the perimeter vultures. What the hell happened while we were gone? Kilmer muttered, starting his post-flight checklist with precision. We wouldn't find out for another 2 hours. The decontamination process was thorough and humiliating. Hot showers with industrial-strength soap that left our skin raw and burning. Our flight suits incinerated, replaced with generic military fatigues that smelled like mothballs and fear. Medical personnel drew blood samples, swabbed our throats, scanned us with devices that clicked and whirred ominously. Clean, the chief medical officer finally announced, stripping off his latex gloves. You're clear for briefing. General Powell looked like he'd aged 10 years since we'd left. His usually immaculate uniform was wrinkled, coffee stains on the sleeves, and his eyes had the hollow look of a man who'd seen too much in too short a time. Gentlemen, he began without preamble, your mission was a complete success. The Romanian facility was obliterated, along with every scrap of research data and biological material it contained. He paused, letting that sink in. Unfortunately, it doesn't matter. The briefing room's main screen flickered to life, showing a world map dotted with pulsing red indicators. North America, Europe, Asia, every continent bleeding crimson warnings. While you were eliminating Target Alpha, the situation deteriorated rapidly across multiple continents. We don't know how or when it started. Could have been days, weeks, even months before we identified the Romanian facility. Hamburg, Boston, Tokyo, Sydney, Cairo, Mexico City. The virus, if we can call it that, was already spreading through global population centers by the time your bombs hit their target. Kilmer leaned forward in his chair. Viral hemorrhagic fever? Ebola variant? Powell's laugh was bitter. We wish. This isn't a natural disease, Captain. Intelligence suggests it's engineered, designed specifically to bypass our immune systems and rewrite basic neurological functions. The infected don't die, they just stop being human. The screen shifted to surveillance footage from what looked like a hospital emergency room. People in medical scrubs running in panic while others, patients I realized, moved with a horrible, lurching gait. The initial symptoms present within hours of exposure. Fever, disorientation, aggressive behavior. But then something changes in the brainstem. Higher cognitive functions shut down, but the primitive drive to feed remains. They become walking appetites driven by instincts older than civilization. One of the figures on screen caught a fleeing nurse, and I had to look away from what followed. The sounds were worse than the images. Zombies, I said, the word tasting like ashes in my mouth. You're talking about zombies. Call them whatever you want, Captain. The result is the same. They're spreading faster than we can contain them, and conventional military tactics are proving ineffective. You can't reason with them, can't intimidate them, can't make them surrender. The only thing that stops them is complete destruction of the brain. Morrison clicked to the next slide, showing orbital photographs of major American cities. Even from space, I could see the smoke columns rising from urban centers, the orange glow of uncontrolled fires. Which brings us to your next assignment. We're implementing the Samson Protocol. I'd heard whispers of Samson in the darkest corners of military planning. Contingency plans for scenarios so catastrophic that victory became secondary to preventing total global collapse. Plans that involve turning America's strategic nuclear arsenal against itself. You want us to bomb American cities, Kilmer said, his voice flat. I want you to save American civilization, Powell corrected. Every hour we delay, the infection spreads geometrically. Traditional military forces are being overrun in urban areas where the infected can use buildings and infrastructure for cover. We need to create fire breaks, sterile zones where the virus can't cross. The next image showed targeting data for Kansas City. Population centers, transportation hubs, refugee camps, all marked for destruction. Your first target is 50 miles from here, Kansas City metro area. 2 million people, give or take. Intelligence suggests 60% are already infected or dead. We drop thermobaric weapons on the primary metropolitan areas, then follow up with incendiary rounds to ensure complete sterilization. My mouth went dry. General, those aren't all infected. There are survivors in those cities, families, children. There are no survivors, Captain. Only the infected and the soon-to-be infected. Every person we leave alive is a potential vector for further spread. This isn't a rescue mission. It's a mercy killing. Powell stood, his chair scraping against the floor with finality. You launch in 4 hours. Get some rest, gentlemen. Tomorrow, we start burning America to save it. The pre-dawn sky was clear and cold as we climbed toward our operational altitude. Below us, the Missouri countryside stretched in all directions, a patchwork of farms and small towns that had no idea what was coming. In the distance, Kansas City's skyline glittered with lights that looked almost normal from this height. Almost. Weapon systems check complete, Kilmer reported. 8 GBU-43 Moab thermobaric weapons loaded and armed. Target acquisition in 20 minutes. Mother of all bombs, each one capable of flattening everything within a mile radius, sucking the oxygen out of the air, and turning concrete buildings into powder. We were carrying enough firepower to erase downtown Kansas City from the map. Ghost Rider, this is command. You are cleared for weapons release on target Bravo. Rules of engagement. Total destruction. No survivors. I keyed my microphone with a hand that wasn't quite steady. Command. Ghost Rider copies. Cleared hot on target Bravo. The targeting computer painted the city in cold. Clinical detail. Union Station, Crown Center, the Country Club Plaza. Landmarks I'd visited as a kid, reduced to coordinates on a bombing run. The infrared cameras showed heat signatures moving through the streets in patterns that hurt to look at. Too many people, moving too purposefully toward sources of warmth and life. First weapon away, Kilmer announced. The Moab fell like a meteor, its guidance fins adjusting course. From our altitude, the explosion looked like a camera flash, a brief moment of white light that bloomed and faded against the city's grid. Then the shockwave hit, rippling outward in concentric circles, toppling buildings like dominoes. Direct hit, target destroyed. 7 more weapons followed, each one erasing another piece of the city I'd grown up near. The plaza where I'd taken my high school girlfriend on our first date. The stadium where I'd watched baseball games with my father. The neighborhoods where normal people had lived normal lives until yesterday. By the time we'd expended our payload, Kansas City was a burning crater 20 miles across. The fires would burn for days, consuming everything the bombs had missed. Nothing would survive. Nothing human anyway. RTB for rearm and refuel, I reported to command, my voice sounding distant. Target Bravo neutralized. Outstanding work. Ghost Rider, your next targets are Detroit and St. Louis. You launch again in 6 hours. As we banked toward home, I looked down at the hellscape we'd created. From this height, it looked peaceful. The fires were pretty, almost, like campfires scattered across a dark landscape. You couldn't see the bodies, couldn't hear the screams that had been cut short by our weapons. You couldn't see the truth, that we'd just murdered 2 million Americans to save the rest of the country. And this was only the beginning. Detroit burned beneath us like a vision of hell. From our operational altitude, the Motor City looked like a broken circuit board, sparking and smoking in the autumn morning light. The Rouge River reflected orange flames where oil refineries had exploded, sending black plumes spiraling into the atmosphere. Interstate highways formed geometric patterns of abandoned vehicles, metallic veins clogged with the exodus of people who would never reach safety. "Target Charlie acquired," Kilmer reported, his voice steady. We'd been flying combat missions for 8 straight hours, and the professional detachment was the only thing keeping us functional. 12 GBU-39 small-diameter bombs loaded, targeting downtown core and industrial sectors. This was our 4th city in 12 hours. After Kansas City came St. Louis, the Gateway Arch standing like a monument over the cremated remains of 500,000 people. Then Memphis, where we'd watched Graceland disappear in a mushroom cloud of thermobaric fury. Each mission felt like amputating another piece of America's soul. "Ghost Rider, this is command. You are cleared hot on target Charlie. Create a sterile perimeter extending 15 miles from ground zero." I keyed the microphone with fingers that had gone numb hours ago. "Command, Ghost Rider. Cleared hot on Charlie. Beginning attack run." The targeting computer painted Detroit in cold blue crosshairs. Renaissance Center, Comerica Park, the Ambassador Bridge connecting to Canada. Everything that had made this city great was about to become radioactive ash. Through our infrared cameras, I could see heat signatures moving through the streets in chaotic patterns that made my stomach clench. Hundreds of individual forms wandering aimlessly, drawn to movement and sound like moths to flame. The infected shambled through abandoned intersections, their movements erratic and purposeless. Some crawled on broken limbs, others stumbled in circles, all of them driven by nothing more than primitive hunger. They collided with each other, with buildings, with debris, showing no awareness beyond the basic need to feed. First ordnance away. The bomb dropped clean, its guidance system adjusting for wind shear and atmospheric pressure. From our altitude, the explosion looked like a photographer's flashbulb, a brief white blossom that expanded and faded against the urban grid. Then the shockwave rippled outward, toppling skyscrapers like dominoes, erasing city blocks in concentric circles of destruction. 11 more weapons followed in perfect sequence, each one calibrated to overlap with the others, ensuring complete sterilization of the target zone. By the time we'd expended our payload, Detroit was a crater 30 miles across, the fires burning hot enough to melt steel and vaporize bone. "Target Charlie neutralized," I reported to command, watching the mushroom clouds rise like funeral pyres. "RTB for rearm and refuel." "Outstanding work, Ghost Rider. Your next targets are Louisville and Nashville. We're coordinating with Ghosts 2 and 3 for simultaneous strikes across the southeastern corridor. You launch again in 4 hours." The mention of other B-2s gave me a brief moment of relief. We weren't alone in this nightmare mission. Somewhere else in American airspace, other crews were carrying the same burden, dropping the same devastation on cities they'd once sworn to protect. Louisville spread beneath us like a cancer on the Ohio River. Even from 9 miles up, I could see the infection had taken hold completely. Entire neighborhoods were dark, power grids failed, emergency services overwhelmed. The few remaining lights flickered like dying stars in an ocean of darkness. Thermal imaging shows massive heat signatures throughout the metropolitan area, Kilmer reported, adjusting our targeting sensors. Looks like concentrated groups around hospitals, schools, anywhere people would have gathered for shelter. "Or feeding," I said, the words bitter in my mouth. We'd been briefed on the infected behavior patterns. They gravitated toward noise, movement, body heat, anywhere the living might be hiding. Hospitals became slaughterhouses. Schools turned into feeding grounds. Shopping malls filled with wandering corpses bumping into walls and each other in endless, mindless circuits. "Ghost Rider, this is command. This is..." "Intelligence reports significant survivor populations in Target Delta. Recommend immediate weapons release to prevent further infection spread." survivor populations. People who'd managed to stay alive for 3 days while their city collapsed around them. Families huddled in basements. Medical personnel trying to save lives. Children who didn't understand why the world had gone insane. Command Ghost Rider. Visual confirms heavy infection presence, but thermal also shows potential civilian signatures. Request verification of target legitimacy. The radio crackled with static for long seconds. When General Powell's voice came through, it carried the weight of absolute authority. Ghost Rider, your orders are clear. Any human presence in infected zones represents potential vector for further contamination. There are no civilians in Target Delta, only the infected and the soon-to-be infected. I stared at the targeting display, watching heat signatures that represented human beings. Infected or not, they'd been American citizens 48 hours ago. The Samson Protocol had evolved beyond military necessity into something darker, something that felt less like salvation and more like murder. "Pete," Kilmer said quietly through the intercom. "We have our orders." "I know." My finger hovered over the weapons release. One button press would erase another American city, would kill thousands of people who might still be human, still be savable. "I know we do." I pressed the button. 16 GBU 31 JDAM bombs fell from our internal bay like rain. Each one carried 2,000 pounds of high explosive, enough to level city blocks and incinerate everything within a quarter-mile radius. Louisville disappeared in a series of expanding fireballs that merged into a single inferno visible from space. "Target Delta neutralized," I reported, my voice hollow. "Proceeding to Target Echo." "Copy, Ghost Rider. Nashville is your final target for today. Ghost 2 reports successful strikes on Atlanta and Birmingham. Ghost 3 is handling Jacksonville and Tampa. Command reports increasing refugee activity along interstate corridors. Ensure complete destruction of all transportation networks." So the other B-2s were systematically erasing the southeastern United States, one city at a time. I wondered if their crews felt the same hollow sickness that gnawed at my stomach, or if they'd found some way to compartmentalize what we were committing. Nashville, Music City, the heart of American country music, where legends were born and dreams came true. In 30 minutes, it would be another smoking crater in the American landscape. The sun was setting as we approached Nashville, painting the sky the color of blood and fire. The city sprawled along the Cumberland River, its famous skyline still intact but darkened by power failures and abandonment. The Grand Ole Opry, Vanderbilt University, the Batman Building, all waiting to be erased by our weapons. "Final target acquired," Kilmer announced. 24 GBU 12 paveway laser-guided bombs loaded. This should finish the job. Through our cameras, I could see movement in the streets below. Not the organized patterns of fleeing civilians, but the random wandering of the infected. They stumbled through intersections, bumped into abandoned cars, fell down and got back up with persistence. No intelligence, no purpose beyond the basic drive to find warm flesh. Some crawled on broken limbs, dragging themselves across asphalt with fingernails worn to bloody stumps. Others spun in endless circles, their damaged brains stuck in neural loops that would never resolve. A few simply stood motionless in the middle of streets, staring at nothing, until some sound or movement triggered their primitive hunting reflexes. "Ghost Rider, you are cleared hot on Target Echo. Make it count. This is our last strike before dark." I initiated the attack run, feeling the familiar vibration as our bomb bay doors opened. 24 precision weapons, each one programmed to hit specific infrastructure targets: power plants, water treatment facilities, highway interchanges, emergency services buildings. Everything that kept a modern city functional. Weapons away. Nashville died in stages. First, the power grid failed, plunging the city into darkness. Then the water system exploded, sending geysers of steam into the cooling air. Finally, the transportation networks collapsed, highways and bridges crumbling into the Cumberland River like broken toys. By the time our weapons had finished their work, Music City was silent forever. "Target Echo neutralized," I reported. "All primary objectives complete. requesting RTB. Outstanding work, Ghost Rider. You've successfully created a sterile corridor from Kansas City to Nashville. Return to base for crew rest and mission debrief. The fuel warning light illuminated on my instrument panel as we crossed into Arkansas airspace. Not an emergency yet, but a reminder that even the most advanced aircraft in the world was subject to the laws of physics. We'd been airborne for 16 hours, dropping enough ordnance to level multiple cities, and our fuel reserves were running low. Fuel status? I asked Kilmer. We're cutting it close, maybe 40 minutes of flight time remaining at current consumption. Whiteman is still 90 minutes out. I checked our position against the navigational display. We were over the Ozark Mountains, rugged terrain with few suitable landing sites. To the north lay Missouri and our home base. To the south, Louisiana and the Gulf Coast, where intelligence reports suggested the infection had spread through oil refinery communities. Emergency airfields? Little Rock Air Force Base is closest. But we lost contact with them 6 hours ago. Could be overrun, could be evacuated. No way to know without visual confirmation. The radio crackled with fragmentary transmissions from military units across the southern United States. Fort Campbell reports 70% casualties, requesting immediate extraction. Barksdale AFB is dark. Repeat. No response from Nuclear Wing Command. CDC Atlanta has gone silent. Last transmission indicated facility breach. Each message painted a picture of systematic military collapse. The most powerful armed forces in human history, reduced to scattered units calling for help that would never come. Pete, Kilmer said, monitoring our fuel gauges. We need to make a decision. Try for Little Rock and risk running out of fuel over populated areas, or find a civilian strip and put down while we still have options. I studied the terrain below us. The Arkansas countryside was dotted with small towns and rural communities, most of them dark and silent. Here and there, isolated fires burned. House fires, car accidents, or worse. But the infection density would be lower than in urban areas, giving us better odds of survival if we had to abandon the aircraft. There, I said, pointing to a thin line cutting through farmland on our display. Municipal Airport southwest of Little Rock. Looks like a decent runway, and it's away from major population centers. Arkadelphia Regional, single runway, 6,000 feet, should be enough for an emergency landing. The rural airport appeared in our targeting system like an oasis in the darkness. A single asphalt runway with basic lighting, a small terminal building, and a handful of general aviation hangars. No control tower, no emergency services, but also no signs of infection or major damage. Gear down and locked, Kilmer reported as we entered our final approach. Flaps extended, emergency checklist complete. The Spirit touched down hard, our landing gear absorbing the impact with protests. I deployed the drag chute and applied maximum braking, feeling the bomber decelerate along the narrow runway. We rolled to a stop just 100 yards from the threshold, our engines winding down with the exhausted sigh of complex machinery pushed to its limits. Silence settled over the cockpit like a blanket. No radio chatter, no engine noise, just the tick of cooling metal and the whisper of Arkansas wind over our diamond-shaped wings. Well, Kilmer said, unbuckling his harness, that's probably the last time we'll ever fly her. I looked back at the Spirit's instrument panels, their displays flickering through post-flight shutdown sequences. $40 billion of American military technology, the most advanced bomber ever created, reduced to a geometric sculpture on a rural runway. Get the survival gear, I ordered, checking my sidearm. We need to secure the area and establish communications. We climbed down from the cockpit onto the airport tarmac, our boots echoing in the unnatural quiet. The terminal building was dark but appeared intact, its glass doors reflecting our aircraft's angular silhouette. A few civilian planes sat parked nearby, Cessnas and Pipers that would never fly again. Movement, Kilmer whispered, pointing toward the fuel depot. A figure emerged from behind the building, walking with the characteristic shambling gait we'd observed from altitude. It had been a woman once, probably a flight instructor based on the aviation uniform hanging from her thin frame. but her eyes were cloudy white and dark fluid dripped from her slack jaw. The infected woman's head turned toward us, drawn by our voices or movement. No intelligence showed in those empty eyes, just primitive hunger and the basic drive to feed. She stumbled forward, bumping into a fuel truck, falling down, getting back up, always moving in our general direction. "Contact front," I said, drawing my Beretta. Single infected, approximately 50 yards. The zombie lurched toward us, her movements clumsy and uncoordinated. She tripped over her own feet, crashed into a parked aircraft, bounced off, and continued her relentless advance. No tactical awareness, no attempt at concealment. Just mindless forward motion driven by instincts older than civilization. I squeezed the trigger twice. The first shot went wide, sparking off concrete. The second punched through her chest without any effect. She didn't even seem to notice she'd been hit. "Headshot," Kilmer reminded me, raising his own weapon. My third shot took off the top of her skull, spraying brain matter across the tarmac. The zombie collapsed like a broken doll, twitching once before going still. "Just like the briefing said," Kilmer observed, "body shots are useless." I stared at the corpse, trying to reconcile what I'd just killed with the surveillance footage we'd studied. This wasn't the coordinated predator the intelligence reports had suggested. It was just a reanimated body stumbling toward food, no more intelligent than a moth drawn to flame. More movement caught my eye. Additional figures emerging from various buildings around the airport. 5 more infected, maybe 6, all shambling in our direction. Airport employees, pilots, passengers who'd been stranded when the world ended. "Multiple contacts," I reported, checking my spare magazines. "We've got company." The zombies approached without coordination or strategy, simply following the sound of our voices. Some got distracted by other stimuli. One stopped to claw at a closed hangar door. Another became fixated on a flickering light in the terminal building. They were drawn to us, but in the most basic, primitive way possible. Kilmer and I moved to defensive positions behind our aircraft's landing gear, using the Spirit's bulk for cover. The infected continued their slow advance, bumping into each other, falling down, getting back up, showing no awareness of tactics or danger. "They're just walking corpses," Kilmer said, taking careful aim at the nearest zombie. "No intelligence at all." His shot dropped a man in mechanic's coveralls, the body crumpling to the tarmac. The other infected showed no reaction to their companion's destruction, no fear, no anger, no recognition that one of their number had just been eliminated. I picked off 2 more with careful headshots, watching them fall like broken marionettes. The remaining zombies continued their shambling advance, stepping over the bodies of their fallen companions without acknowledgement. "Cleanup complete," I announced as the last infected collapsed. "Area secure." We searched the terminal building and surrounding facilities, finding them empty except for signs of hasty evacuation. Scattered papers, abandoned luggage, coffee cups still sitting on desks. People had left in a hurry, but there was no evidence of violence or mass infection. "Radio equipment in the tower," Kilmer reported. "Still functional, but I'm not picking up any traffic from military frequencies." I tried raising Whiteman Air Force Base, then other installations across the Midwest. Nothing but static and fragmentary civilian transmissions from amateur radio operators reporting local conditions. Infected overran the high school, but the elementary is still secure. Anyone know what happened to the National Guard? They were supposed to. Don't trust the government broadcasts. They're still saying everything's under control. Each transmission painted a picture of isolated communities fighting for survival, while their government had either abandoned them or been overrun. The military chain of command we'd served faithfully was simply gone. I sit here now, hours after our emergency landing, typing on a laptop we found in the terminal office. The screen flickers occasionally, running on battery power since the electrical grid failed sometime after midnight. Outside, Arkansas darkness presses against the windows like something alive, and I can hear them. The slow shuffling footsteps, the wet dragging sounds, the occasional low moan that makes Kilmer look up from his weapon maintenance. Kilmer sits in the corner, methodically cleaning his Beretta for what must be the 15th time tonight. The clicking sound of the weapon being disassembled and reassembled has become oddly comforting. A reminder that we're still alive, still human, still capable of maintaining our equipment and our discipline. The infected we encountered were nothing like the intelligence briefings suggested. No coordination, no tactical awareness, no learning capability. Just reanimated corpses stumbling toward whatever caught their attention, driven by hunger they couldn't understand and would never satisfy. But that almost makes it worse. At least an intelligent enemy can be reasoned with, negotiated with, defeated through superior strategy. These things are just force of nature, like a hurricane or earthquake. They'll keep coming until there's nothing left to come for. We dropped enough ordnance today to level half the country. Kansas City, St. Louis, Memphis, Detroit, Louisville, Nashville. All gone, all reduced to radioactive craters in the American heartland. Millions of people, infected and uninfected alike, incinerated in the name of containment. And it didn't work. The virus was already too widespread, the infection vectors too numerous. While we were bombing cities, the disease was spreading through rural communities, small towns, isolated farmhouses, places too small for strategic bombing, too scattered for military containment. We failed. The Samson Protocol failed. The most advanced military in human history failed against a microscopic enemy that turns our own bodies against us. But we're still here, still breathing, still fighting. Kilmer looks up from his weapon, his face gaunt in the laptop's glow. You know what the worst part is? What? $40 billion of aircraft sitting outside and it can't help us against a single zombie. He's right. The B-2 Spirit represents the pinnacle of human technological achievement. Stealth technology, precision guidance systems, satellite communications, nuclear capability, and it's completely useless against an enemy that feels no fear, follows no strategy, and can only be stopped by destroying the brain. Get some rest, I tell him. We'll figure out our next move in the morning. What next move? We're AWOL from a military that probably doesn't exist anymore, stranded in rural Arkansas with about 60 rounds of ammunition and whatever supplies we can scavenge. We survive, I say, still typing. We find other survivors. We try to rebuild something worth saving. Think anyone will believe this story? I look at the words on the screen. Our failed mission. The bombing of American cities. The collapse of everything we'd sworn to protect. It reads like science fiction, like the fevered dream of a paranoid conspiracy theorist. Does it matter? If there's anyone left to read it, they'll be living through their own version of hell. Kilmer nods, returning to his weapon maintenance. Click, scrape, click. The sound of military discipline maintaining itself even when everything else has fallen apart. I keep typing, documenting our mission for whoever might find this record. The laptop battery shows 2 hours remaining, enough time to finish this account, to leave some testimony of what happened here. Outside, something howls in the distance. Not quite human, not quite animal. The sound of a world that's forgotten what it used to be. Then closer, much closer. The unmistakable sound of hands slapping against glass, of bodies pressing against the terminal windows. Kilmer looks up from his Beretta, meeting my eyes. More company. How many rounds left? I ask. 37, you? 23. He nods, returning to his weapon. Click, scrape, click. The sound of military discipline maintaining itself even when everything else has fallen apart. I think about my sister Rebecca back in Ohio. At least, where Ohio used to be before we turned it into a radioactive wasteland. She'd always teased me about my dedication to the Air Force, said I loved my aircraft more than people. You married that damn plane, Pete, she'd joke during family gatherings. When are you going to find a real woman and give me some nieces and nephews? The truth was, she wasn't entirely wrong. 22 years of military service, and what did I have to show for it? No wife, no kids, no life outside the cockpit of a stealth bomber. I'd missed her wedding because of a training exercise, missed my father's funeral because of a deployment to Qatar, missed Christmas dinners, birthday parties, graduations, all sacrificed on the altar of national security. And for what? so I could spend the last 3 days incinerating American cities? My mother used to send care packages when I was stationed overseas. Homemade cookies that arrived as crumbs. Letters written in her careful handwriting asking when I was coming home for a visit. I'd always promise soon. Always had some excuse about operational tempo or training requirements. The last letter I received was 6 months ago. She'd mentioned that the neighbor's boy had come back from Afghanistan. How proud his parents were to have him home safe. I wonder if she's still alive. If any of them are still alive. Toledo was one of the secondary targets for the Midwest Corridor sweep. Ghost 4 probably dropped their payload there yesterday while I was busy erasing Nashville. My entire family, my childhood, my memories, all vaporized to prevent the spread of infection. The irony cuts deeper than any wound. I dedicated my entire adult life to protecting America, to serving something greater than myself. I'd flown missions over Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, always believing I was making the world safer for people like my family. And in the end, the greatest threat to American civilians turned out to be American pilots following American orders. Kilmer stops cleaning his weapon for a moment, staring at the disassembled parts spread across the table. You ever think about getting out? Before all this, I mean. Every pilot thinks about it, I admit. But where would I go? This is all I know. Flying, bombing, following orders. Not exactly marketable skills in the civilian world. I was going to put in my papers next year, he says quietly. 20 years was enough. My kid's starting high school, and I've missed half his life already. Figured it was time to be a real father instead of just a guy who sends money home. The weight of those words settles between us like lead. His kid, probably evacuated to some refugee center that no longer exists. Or worse, became one of the shambling corpses we've been observing. All those missed birthdays, those little league games he didn't attend because of deployment schedules, the conversations they'd never have now. Military service demands everything from you. Your time, your relationships, your moral certainty. We'd both given our lives to an institution that promised to protect the innocent. And in the final hour, that same institution ordered us to murder them wholesale. But we're still here. Still human. Still remembering. And sometimes, that has to be enough.